Hi, this is Jeffrey from Graphfinancials. Today we're going to start the first episode about Alibaba, and we're going to talk about the antitrust issues of Mastercard. All right. Now, why am I mentioning that? Because you probably know Mr. Charlie Munger, who works with Warren Buffett, is a shareholder of Alibaba. Alibaba owns the Ant Group, and Berkshire Hathaway owns some shares in Mastercard. Now, Mastercard is a case that I've studied from 2005, from the date of the antitrust case, because I used to work in risk arbitrage, and in risk arbitrage you have to assess antitrust economics for regulatory approval purposes. And the case for Mastercard was damning. In other words, this is a totally anti-competitive business, and it's great news for shareholders because they are able to reap massive return. I remember working in a hedge fund, and we had an order placed at the IPO time for the very reason of antitrust and abnormal profit. What is abnormal profit? It's you can define it even without looking at the financial statements. It's very easy to understand when you study antitrust economics. It's economic surplus. In other words, being able to overcharge your clients and siphon lots of economic surplus, and that translates into lots of cash, and being able to buy back your shares, and value per share keeps going up, because you have this ability to charge way above the competitive level that is common in many industries. Those cases are very rare, and the literature from antitrust regulators is extremely interesting. So let's start from the beginning. We had in 1998 an antitrust lawsuit that was filed on Mastercard, Visa. There were several different topics. One of them was the competitive program policy. What was that? It's basically the banks, Visa and Mastercard, were owned by the banks, okay, and that was actually part of the strategy, which was that all the banks would distribute Visa and Mastercard. The banks would own Visa and Mastercard. And the program policy prohibited financial institution participants in the respective systems from issuing competing proprietary payment cards, such as American Express or Discover. So in other words, if you imagine you have lots of banks, and if you're a participant, you can't issue from other systems. So we say, okay, you can't issue, but then they can opt out and this and that. It creates network effects, both at the level of the merchants. We say, you know, I have Visa and Mastercard, and why would I take another machine from Discover and American Express? And then it's circular. There's a circularity, because they say, hey, they have the biggest network. Let me just, as a merchant, just want those biggest networks. And the other side of the circularity is that the consumer would hold a card from Visa and Mastercard, because they would figure, well, you know what? I'm going to go for this label because I need to be able to pay in many stores. And as a result, the market share from Discover plus this policy was extremely effective at blocking them from getting market share. All right? In 40 years, I think Discover got 8% of market share only. All right, there was another policy which was to require merchants. So this is, if you're on desktop, you can expand the slider. You can expand the font size. It's not a video; it's augmented media, so you can read at will. You can pause me and read that for yourself. Now, sorry. Accept the debit cards if they accepted Mastercard branded cards. So in other words, this is another thing. It's an adjacent market. So the Visa and Mastercard on the credit card processing had a very large market share, and used that to force the merchants to accept the debit part. And this is a way to get And since the card has both the debit processing and credit, it resulted in a lot of people using the debit part, okay? And the debit part of Mastercard and Visa, the fee were much, much higher than the fees of pure debit processor like Concord, EFS, CE, NICE, those type of pure debit transaction. So that was the honor card, old card policy imposed by Visa and Mastercard. Sorry. And what happened is that there was a lawsuit from Discover on this honor old card policy. There was lawsuit from consumers saying, well, you know what, you are overcharging us on this debit transaction because you are passing along that to the customers. And so basically you have honor all cards, okay, forcing people to, merchants to accept all cards, and then since the same card was processing both, they would charge a lot more on debit. And then the merchant were not very happy about that because they would lose on their transaction. Okay, so there was also the merchant lawsuit. And as a result, the end customer would be passed along those charges, so they would also sue. Right? Now there was the question of interchange fee. The interchange fee is basically interchange fee is the fee that the credit card processor would charge. Again, you might be wondering, why am I mentioning all that? Ant Group has a lot of similarity with Visa and Mastercard, and had some antitrust fine in China. And then we're going to come down to that. So there was also, coming back to Mastercard, there was also some lawsuit. There was a lawsuit that the interchange fee, that was this fee that was charged by, you can read, this is the fee they charged from the merchant, the acquirer bank, okay, and pass along to the issuing bank. And Mastercard would charge a lot of these fees and keep a lot for themselves. Now, this resulted in the largest antitrust settlement in US history at $7.5 billion, but some have argued that it was a float settlement. This settlement was in 2013. All right. Now, if you, so why are we mentioning that? Because this is a natural monopoly type of business. This interchange fee was also discussed in EU statement of objection on this fee. There was a second EU statement of objection. There was a UK Office of Fair Trade investigation that resulted, which was on two sides, both on the interchange fee and also on the fee on the other side, reverse side, where the bank, the ATM, where you would use your card to withdraw cash, were overcharging. But then it was not they would be the acquirer which would get too much fee. So basically, those credit cards were a system where a lot of fees were extracted for the benefit of banks, for the benefit of Mastercard, the intermediary, and Visa, which were operating as a duopoly. And the OFT decided to issued a statement saying, yeah, you are in contravention. You are contravening to antitrust law. Now, coming back to the point, we have here Ant Group antitrust fine that we're going to look at in the next episode. It was a very large fine. If you are wondering if it's a coincidence, it's not a coincidence. It has very similar economics. And if you're wondering why Charlie Munger is shareholder there on Alibaba, which owns a significant portion of Ant Group, and this portion alone is worth a lot of the total company. And if you're wondering if it's coincidence that Berkshire Hathaway has a position, well, it's not either. We're going to go into the next chapter. We're going to go into the valuation, but that was the intro on antitrust. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.